Good morning, friends who are joining us on the internet. We are here. Welcome to Sunday School. We're going to start in just a couple minutes. It's good to be with you. All right. While the rest of us are gathering, we have a couple of little questions for you to be thinking about. We're going to be talking about holy friendship, and so we want you to be thinking about a couple things. And let me see if I can get them for you. There they are. 3 questions to think about as we gather. When has a friendship encouraged you to do something you might not have done alone? When has a friendship helped you see yourself and the world more honestly? And when has a friendship grown you closer to God? I'm just saying hello to them special, the same way we get together, giving them a little heads up on the questions. So it's great to see y'all. How did everybody survive the ice storm and mess?
We're here.
We did survive. We were talking a little earlier how the first day of like not being able to go anywhere and seeing the ice on the roads and not having nobody drive by, kind of like flashbacks to the first days of the pandemic. And in our family, everyone was like a little extra grumpy, and it took us a while to like figure out why. And it was like, oh my gosh, please don't say we're trapped again. Good morning, Terry and Betty. Thanks for being here. It's good to see y'all. So these are questions just to think about as we're gathering this morning. We're going to be talking about friendship for the next 3 weeks. And so 3 questions to get us started. You don't have to answer these out loud, but some of you requested questions at the beginning. So as luck would have it, here they are. These are, but even if you don't answer them, I'd invite you to think about them. If you get, Nikki, can you hold up for everyone your bingo card over there? If you get your Holy Trinity by the Lake Friendship bingo card at church or online, they're available online too. Through, I think they've been emailed out. We're going to add them to the website soon. You can turn it over to take notes and maybe answer some of these friendship questions, because you don't actually have to turn your bingo card in. You get to keep it. So you can scribble on the back, because I really want to invite us all to be thinking about, before we start talking about friendship, to have gotten to a place where we have a couple of friends in mind. We don't have to speak their names out loud. But just like in the space of our own hearts, to have a couple of those special friends in mind. So when has a friendship encouraged you to do something you might not have done alone? When has a friendship helped you see yourself or the world more honestly? And when has a friendship grown you closer to God? So I'm going to let those questions sit and let folks online. You can absolutely punch those in in the comment section, and we will visit them too. Hey there, good looking Karen. Karen, who always calls everyone good looking, so I need to like qualify that. Reminder, next Sunday is Sandwich Sunday, so don't forget, if you do that, bring the sandwich loaves. We'll collect them here in this space. So I was thinking about this morning, and I really didn't have any intention of answering any of these questions myself. But I thought of 2 things. I remember as a 19-year-old, I was doing a discernment summer program in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and being charged, my assignment was to go into a government housing project outside of Pittsburgh, Moon Township, and start a ministry, any ministry. And there's just absolutely no way I would have ever tried that without a friend. But I was partnered with an intern friend, and we started kind of walking the neighborhood, praying to God, like, we don't know how to do this. And that great Anne Lamott prayer we've talked about before, help. And it was the gift of that friendship that sustained us through the early times of figuring out how to become friends of the neighborhood too. And I also remember in college, my roommate waking up one day with a kind of panicked look on his face, and he said, "Jonathan, do you realize what's happened?" And I said, "No." He said, "This is our last time." We were like seniors or juniors, but we were going to be graduating off semester or something. This is our last time to do something stupid for spring break. We should do it. And I absolutely would not have done what we ended up doing apart from his friendship. And come on in, Karen. And what we did is we are both sports nuts. We went from Wheaton College outside of Chicago to where his family lived in Detroit, stayed overnight, drove through a blizzard to get to Toronto, and the Hockey Hall of Fame, drove to New York and saw the Cooperstown and the Baseball Hall of Fame, Springfield and the Basketball Hall of Fame, saw friends at each stop along the way, back through Connecticut. We skipped the NFL Hall of Fame for reasons not known to me, but it was ridiculous, it was absurd, and it was delightful. Some wonderful memories. So, but I wouldn't have done that alone because that would have just been silly. It was still silly. Good morning, Marcia. Good to see you. All right. Before we kick on to our opening prayer and get into some of our content a little more, anybody have a friend that they want to share, or a memory or something that they want to invite into the space of our conversation? All right. Now, for those of you just joining online, you don't have to name a friend, but we invite you to think of one, to have at least one person whose friendship has been special to you, meant something to you before. Just hold in your heart and in your mind as we go through the rest of our class today. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Loving Lord, where would we be without friends? We would literally be no place, alone in your creation, yet unable to recognize it as creation. But you place us next to one another, and being so placed, we are forced to recognize that others exist. Bodies, attraction, recognition, friendship, love. How wonderful and frightening. We are not alone. You created us passionate beings, hungry for one another. You want to make us your friends. And in that doing, make us friends of one another and even ourselves. Life is sweet when we are in love. Praise you for giving us one another. Amen. That prayer comes from Stanley Hauerwas in his short book, Prayers Plainly Spoken, which is a delightfully short book with an assortment of prayers that he wrote as a professor at Duke for his classes. He married, he's talking about friendship, he married later in life a woman, Paula, who is delightful and is the opposite of Stanley. Stanley's a world-renowned theologian who's known for being crass and vulgar, and Paula Gilbert is like the very opposite of that. She is just like this pillar of peace and prayer, and she challenged him one time, how come you don't start your classes with prayer? And this book was his attempt to do that. But we'll be opening each of our sessions over these 3 weeks with this prayer. All right, so I was listening to podcasts lately because podcasts give you things to do when you're walking, and I'm trying to walk more, following Zoe's good example in my neighborhood. And I'm listening to these podcasts, and they're talking about secrets to relationships that thrive. And this is kind of the list of things that they gave. And I don't think it's a bad list. So when you think about friendship and try to like understand, and sometimes it's a fool's errand to try to understand the stuff of friendship. Sometimes it's just a gift and we receive it. But when you look at, and in some cases, like try to research like what makes friendship, what is the stuff of friendship? This is the kind of stuff that came up in the podcast: understanding, reciprocity, vulnerability and trust, and regular connection. In other words, you might have a friend that you kind of can sort of pick up with. You see each other once every 5 years and you pick right up where you left off. But that's almost like a reactivating a friendship. It's not a friendship that you're relying on today. One of the things that even the researcher said is like, it's surprising for some people to see understanding instead of like maybe love. But when you think of love, which is surely a part of friendship, it always involves understanding. How do you communicate love without communicating that you have spent the time to understand what someone's going through or something like that? So, but this is a list, not a comprehensive list. But one of the things I was struck by that's not on the list is time. And another podcast I was listening to was like, all you have to do is think back to large family gatherings at Thanksgiving and Christmas where you followed the same script for 30 years to know that time does not always make a friendship beautiful, right? Time isn't, so it's not a given that we can just like keep showing up, lack intentionality, and beautiful friendships will blossom. Like friendships take a kind of focus on one another and a kind of commitment from one another. But so that's just an observation about inevitability, and friendships aren't inevitable. They're gifts, but they're not inevitable. What would you want to add to this list? What would you want to add to this list? Understanding, reciprocity. When you think of the friendships that have been meaningful to you, the friendships that have blessed you in this life.
Okay.
Ken.
I give up.
Good. Memories? Absolutely. Shared.
Having things in common.
Having things in common.
Yeah, things that you like.
Having things you like to do in common. That's interesting too. That's a whole different level. It's one thing if like we think we have the same ideas in common, but if there's something we enjoy doing together, memories, which is maybe where time helps, because we can have shared experiences that we can then remember over time.
It's rare that you can get all of those in one friend.
Yeah.
I've got friends that we regularly connect, but we don't have very good vulnerability, trust, and even understanding. We're like, I have no idea where you're coming from in this. I don't get you on that, but we sure get along over here on this part.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes.
I think that friendship is having something in common. And I also think that you need to have something in common with the person that you're going to marry, because if you don't have a lot of things in common, things can get pretty rough. You know, that's my recommendation. I used to tell my teachers that you need to have more than one or two things in common with a person.
Absolutely. So.
It's probably good to trust, but I think truth telling is really important.
Yes. When you think about, say more about that.
Well, I mean, if you're not honest with the person that you have a friendship with, if you aren't able to tell the truth to one another, then it can't be a very close relationship. And if there's a lie involved, and I'm thinking of what Ken said about marriage, if there's a lie involved, it can certainly ruin a relationship faster than anything else. So I'm not sure if you want to word that, but that's what occurs to me at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, that trust is the bedrock, and truth telling is one of the clearest ways to be a person of trust. And you can think through about with your friendships. We're going to be looking more at this book, some of the content of this book this week and a week from next week. Next week, we're going to be joined virtually by the author, and I'm really, really excited. But he talks about like not everybody, we don't trust everybody the same, and that's normal, and that's good. Like your vulnerability isn't owed to everyone. So when you think about those friends that are your like, oh my gosh, the world feels like it's caving in on me, who are the first 2-3 people that I'm going to reach out to, give a phone call, ask for prayer, ask for help, or just like say, tell me I'm not alone. Those people are people you count on to tell you the truth. You don't need platitudes in those moments.
One of them said, discussing the problem and relation, and one of them said, do you want me to tell you what I think, or do you want me to tell you what you need to hear? And I thought, that's a friend right there, because she's going to have my back either way.
What a wonderful gift. And to have the wherewithal to ask permission. I can, what a gift. What a gift. Because sometimes we're venting, sometimes we're looking for solutions. It's not always obvious, but a friend, once that goal is identified through conversation, is willing to do either. Absolutely. Betty offers acceptance, which makes that truth telling, I think, possible. Like, I'm going to tell you the truth, and I remember the first day we tried this like dance around the wires. This was a couple months ago, and I said something offhand to y'all about, well, it'll either work or I'll be flat on the ground having tripped over these wires. And Kirk, you said offhand, and either way, you'll be among friends who love you. That acceptance makes truth-telling possible. It makes being ourselves possible. One of the remarkable things that Rowan Williams said about Desmond Tutu prior to his recent death was that Desmond Tutu was someone who, by the way he was, invited other people to be more the way they are. And so we can discover, and I think that's one of the things intuitively we enjoy about friendships, right? And Victor will say in his book, you probably don't have a ton of these kind of friends, but maybe 3 to 6 would be more than enough. But friends where you don't have to think about how you're going to show up. You're just going to be who you are. There's no extra energy required for any level of facade or anything else. You just, we have some dear friends we see every year when we travel to visit Rebecca's family at the beach in North Carolina. Some friends who've stayed in our grad school area, the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area. It takes 0 energy to be with them. We just like show up, and it's life. It's shared life together. And that requires acceptance, because we don't. What's that? Dependability. If, yes, you got each other's backs. Absolutely. All right. So we're going to watch a video just now on friendship, and it's so we've talked some about friendship. You can probably think of friends who you have had in the life of faith. But now this next person is going to invite us to think about friendship as a spiritual act or a spiritual practice, which I think is really interesting. That's a slightly different level of talking about friendship. So as you're watching the video, I want to ask you to look for 3 things. What's one thing that resonates? What's one thing you think is important to talk about more? Maybe she doesn't say it enough, or maybe she doesn't say enough about it, or you think it could be expanded, or you disagree with it some. And what's one thing you would want to add? So you can be looking for any combination of those 3 things. Now I'm going to disappear my screen, but I'm going to leave the audio on, so just don't like have a sneezing fit right now, because they'll still be able to hear us and all that good stuff. All right, we'll do that. Not that, that.
I think friendship is kind of a neglected practice in Christianity. It's something I think that's seen sometimes as outside of our life with God, but in fact, many of us come to our relationship with God through our friendships. And Jesus, of course, said, friendship's really important, that nobody has greater love than the one who would lay down his life for his friends. So I've been trying to think about friendship as a Christian practice, and how it fits into our life with God and how it's part of our life with God. Friendship, like most Christian practices, is a practice that takes a lot of time, that we need each other for. It takes a lot of trust and patience. It's not something we can instantly achieve, but it's something that we nurture over time with people that we love. Christian life requires us to be open all the time to newness and new people coming in. Our circle around the table at communion always has to be ready to get bigger. And every time we welcome a new person through baptism, we have to make a little bit more room in this community. Friendship is like that as well. We have to be, in order to cultivate friendships, we have to be attentive to what's around us, who's around us, what we care about, what we share. We have to see the potential in small things, and we have to have hope that our relationships can deepen and grow and change over time. Christianity has a lot of wisdom in it about friendship. Some of the medieval monastics wrote a lot about spiritual friendship because, of course, they were all living very close together in communities where, they're all eating together and spending their lives together and having their arguments together, and loving maybe some of each other more than others. For example, Aelred of Rivaux in the 12th century wrote about, spiritual friendship and what it's like to cultivate a special friendship within a community of friends, and how to do that in a way that honors people's particularity and that honors the fact that we are drawn perhaps to some people more than others, but that doesn't at the same time block out the rest of the community. So that's the kind of thing I've been thinking about, friendship, and also our intimate relationships. Friendships are very intimate, of course, can be very intimate, but some of our relationships are more bodily intimate than others. And so trying to think about our sexual relationships and our friendships sort of on the same continuum, and paying attention not to how different they are, but to how much they have in common, and how the same kinds of patience and trust and hope is required to nurture an intimate relationship with somebody over time. What does it mean to me to be a friend of Jesus? I guess for me to be, I guess I think of two things immediately. I mean, one is it takes a lot of time and patience and hope to cultivate a friendship with Jesus, too. It's not that we get baptized and there we are walking on the road to Emmaus. It's that I feel like my friendship with Jesus is taking me my whole life long, and I'm still in the middle of it, and I guess I am like the disciples on the road to Emmaus because I still am not always recognizing Jesus when he's right in front of my face. So on the one hand, I think of that nurturing a relationship with Jesus, that's, the kind of personal relationship that we often talk about in Christian communities, is not particularly easy when he's not walking and talking next to us. But then, of course, Jesus is walking and talking next to us. And that's the other thing that I think of when I think of what does it mean to be a friend of Jesus? I think to be a friend of Jesus is to be a friend of the world, and to be a friend of others, and to cultivate the kind of availability and openness that Jesus so clearly embodied. I think that's not always easy to do alone, and that's why we need each other in community, because to sustain that kind of radical openness, we need the support of our friends, and we need the support of our brothers and sisters, and we need to be able to, if we're going to be able to offer hospitality to people who have no homes, people who are deeply lonely, people who are ill, then we really need each other, because no one person can do these things all on their own. So being a friend of Jesus, it's a beautiful question. I think, it has to do both with, what's going on silently and intimately inside of each of us, but it also has to do with our life in community, and our life of upholding each other as friends and helping each other be able to befriend others in the way that Jesus did.
All right, we're back. As you think about what we just saw and think about possible answers to some of those questions we asked, wanted to bring into mind some scriptures that talk about friendship, not all the scriptures that talk about friendship, but some of them, and see what we notice in these. Jesus said, "For John the Baptist has come eating no bread and drinking no wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, look, a glutton and drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners." So that Jesus was making this observation to the religious leaders when they were critiquing John the Baptist on the one hand because he was too austere and too strange, eating bugs and shouting brood of vipers at people in the wilderness, kind of off-putting. And then Jesus comes and it's just like a banquet all the time, right? There's this richness and this fullness, and this becomes one of the big critiques about Jesus, that he is a friend of tax collectors and sinners. He's a friend of the wrong people. And I think one time, I love how that is an accusation. It's kind of like the name Christian at first was a derogatory kind of thing to call someone a little Christ, and then it becomes, this is something they intend as an insult, but I love how you could almost use it as an offertory sentence. A friend of tax collectors and sinners, come, let us adore him. Like that's our story, that Jesus has become our friend. And the Pharisees and the scribes, this is from Luke's gospel, were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." In John's gospel, in the last, the prayer before he dies, that goes his discourse with his disciples and his prayer, he says, "I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father." And that it's that self-disclosure again, that vulnerability, that truth-telling. And that's become the basis of a new kind of friendship Jesus has with us. Now, friendship has particular kind and quality. You always hear parents telling their kids, like, watch out what kind of friends you hang out with. And so I don't want to just sort of glamorize friendship apart from that quality. Sometimes there are truly destructive friendships. Sometimes there are friendships built on the very opposite of all of the things that you have helped name. Friends who tell lies. And anyway, watch this, how one of the main events of friendship in the Gospels happens that same day. Herod and Pilate became friends with each other before that they had been enemies. And this is when they meet each other in a different kind of way in the process of Jesus's crucifixion and trial. So a reminder that if we want to cultivate the kinds of friendship that, well, I guess behind that would be a question. It's like, what are the kinds of friendships you long for? What kind of friendship do you long for with others? And if you want to cultivate those kinds of things, it takes a little bit of paying attention to ourselves and the world and that wonderful spectrum that our speaker shared a second ago. And then, of course, the verse on friendship. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. That speaks a little bit to the dependability that Zoe, you were talking about, that availability. And it's most important for us to remember, I think, that Jesus is primarily, of course, talking about himself. This is how Jesus sees his relationship with us. So I want to do a quick pause and just say, what in here, in these verses, do you see? Hopefully some echoes with the video, and then any answers you want to share to those questions we asked right before we watched the video.
Talking about there. We often look at that as, okay, I'm going to die for you, but in a way, there's so much more there. If we're truly going to be a friend to someone, it means being willing to put a pause on what you're doing in your life to be able to do something for that person. Laying down your life doesn't necessarily mean dying. It means, okay, it's not what I want right now. Let me just stop everything that I had planned for myself and help you. Whatever that might be. But in a way, it's a small way to lay down your life, but you miss those opportunities. God moves so many times.
It's that being available. Someone I heard someone say, I don't know I like to cite my sources, but I don't remember where this one came from. I heard to that end, Kirk, someone said, well, I know you would die for me. Would you live for me? And would you live for me? Like, you could imagine your kids saying that. You could imagine your partner maybe saying that, or someone else in your family. I know you would die for me, but will you live for me, or will you live with me and make space in your life for the things that are important to me? That's part of, I think, God's question to us too. I know you'll die for me, but will you live each day with me and have an imagination for the things that love requires? One of the things I love about Paul, who can be that cranky, irritable, long-winded writer, when he says, like, love is the most excellent way, and we heard that passage last week, he then goes and breaks it down. And one of the first things he says is love is patient, right? And I was listening to a radio station this morning. The preacher was reminding us listeners that he wasn't just talking, especially like for weddings and stuff, where we hear that passage most often. He was talking to a community that was at each other's throats. They were just like, they were fighting over food at communion, at the agape feast. They were cheating each other. They were cheating on each other. They were just like a total mess. And in that, he's like, you're not going to get anywhere if you cannot be patient, if you can't make room for each other. We talked about friends having things in common. The commitment to share love of a certain quality, I think, is one of those things to have in common. And then when you do have that, you can abide all kinds of differences if you have a love that is patient. So like one of the great friendships of our age has been the late Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And they are total opposites, right? Supreme Court, which is like almost trigger language for half of the country, just to say Supreme Court, on total opposite sides. And they were best friends. They were best friends because they had learned love that was patient, and they were patient with each other and sought to understand each other. Anything else y'all want to add at this point? Juanita?
I think too, when you look back at the way God lived, he didn't just love the rich, poor, he loved the sinner, the prostitute.
Yes.
People that the way the wine for he provided. You look at people, and for me, the ones that judge people and think they up here and turn their nose up, I really pray for that person hard.
Mm.
Because somewhere, if you love God, ain't none of us perfect. But if you really get him in your heart and love him, he'll change all that. Amen. You can look at that person and pray for that person to be more passionate, quit being judgmental, always looking for the wrong in people. Sometimes you have to go through life. My mother always said, don't make you black, white, and blue, or purple. We all think alike, we all breathe alike, we all got the same heart. And she always told us, you have to use God eyes every day, sometimes every 5 minutes.
Yeah. To
get through a day. But I learned through being here all these years, it ain't about them. Because if you love Jesus, he give you and accept you for your good and the bad and ugly. But we ain't always been perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I know I haven't. I don't know about nobody else. Mm-hmm. I haven't. But God changed all that. I ain't never been just a rude person, but it's like when you look back at your life, you think, thank Jesus. It saved us, And once you really get saved, you can look at the ugliest people and be the ugliest to you and still love them. Yeah. And understand that they got, I pray for them to get further in life than what they see.
Right. Yes.
I do. I really, and I can look at them and know they don't like me. A sad, poor thing. And when it comes down, I don't say a word, and I say, I love you. Not sometimes because I want to, it's because God loves me in the midst of everything I have done. And who is me to judge you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You got to look at a friend so many different ways,
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many stories in the Bible where Jesus sets up a parable of someone who's been forgiven a great debt and then goes and says, I've been forgiven a $10 million debt. Juanita, you owe me 50 cents from that soda last week. And anyone who remembers that great debt, how can you? And then the other picture that that Jesus gives all the time is the person who is kind of harsh, closed off. Closed off is sort of the language of it, where love would be open. They've closed themselves off. They are prisoners to their own judgments. They become lonely, abandoned to themselves, and locked off. The rich man who's trying to store up treasures for himself, and you fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. One of my favorite gospel stories, I found out recently, it was one of my best friend's favorite gospel stories too. It's a weird one to have your favorite, is I think it's Luke 16. It's the parable of the dishonest steward. It's the parable of the dishonest steward, someone who finds themselves, it's like he finds out he's going to lose his job, and he's like, tell you what, you owe the master 18, make it 5. You owe 23, make it 2. And he makes friendships by means of dishonest wealth. And there's almost like this invitation for us to do that too, to just be generous toward each other, even before it kind of makes sense, because that parable doesn't quite make sense to me sometimes. I don't think God is the dishonest steward, but you find yourself with all kinds of things. What is it for? What are your gifts for? They're for building up the glory of God and the building up of the church, or the building up of God's friends. So how can the things we have be used for that? All right, let's see what else we got. Uh-oh. My kids said it was weird to like quote yourself in a Sunday school class, but this is just me trying to share some reflections that hopefully will bring us to some practical actions that will end us for today and lead us a little bit to next week. Here we go. Sorry, the audio is not working for them some, so hopefully that fixes it. And then, oops, there we go. One great way to practice friendship all through the month of February, and thank you, Nikki, for lending me your card, is Friendship Bingo. Friendship Bingo is the card that you can pick up in the church. It's available online too, and it infuriates my kids because the free space is not in the very middle. But I told them in order to put the free space in the middle, we would have had to add 9 more steps. So we're gonna have exercise. We're gonna have prizes. So if you get 4 in a row and you can absolutely use that free space, at least in a couple directions, you can get a prize. And we'll be awarding prizes. You don't have to be in person for this, but at the annual meeting, because the annual meeting is going to be the last Sunday of the month. You can go 4 in a row. You can do 4 corners, and you can do blackout. Now, if you call, we set up a special email for this, bingo@htbtl.org. So you can just write bingo@htbtl.org to call bingo. Just say, hey, I got it. And then you just list the ones you got. We check it by the card. And secret, everyone has the same card. So it's, you just show us like 4 in a row and we're like, great, you win. Tell us which one. But you can't call blackout now because some of these things are not available now. The sign up for the Parish Postcard Pals, which Julia Broughton, I'm really grateful for. She's going to be leading. That sign up doesn't start until February 15th. So we have some ways to make sure you're not cheating, in other words. Similarly with dinners for 8, if you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to have a group of friends I could be paired with. The church here y'all have done that for years. You can sign up, but Roberta's going to be opening that sign up middle of the month or so. So there's some things you kind of have to be patient with because love is patient. But we've got some really fun ways to kind of talk about. And one of the things that is share the friendship class with a friend so you can tell someone about this conversation. They can catch up online, join us. One thing that is not on here, but it should have been on here is to take an extra card from the church and give it to a friend. Because these are not sort of like Holy Trinity exclusive activities. You don't have to go to a church or go to this church for 1 month, share prayer requests with a friend on a weekly basis. Ain't nothing copyrighted or special about that. To send a note of encouragement to 3 people you appreciate. We can all do these things. So thank you, Nikki, for lending me your card. I'll give it back. I'll give it back to Trip now because y'all shuffled. And we will be joined next week by Reverend Cannon. He's Reverend Cannon Doctor. He's got a lot of letters around his name. Reverend Cannon Doctor Victor Austin. I'm really excited for his being with us. And we'll be talking some more about friendship. So thank you, friends. I appreciate you, and I appreciate this time together. Thank y'all, and thank you for your patience. And I don't know what you said about me, Mom, but I'll make it up to you later. Love you.